Hello everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today I thought, I have been doing a lot of videos that are very pre-scripted, very dense, very prepared. And so I thought what I wanted to do would be to have a little bit more of a stripped back conversation and also try to cover something that I have struggled with knowing how to talk about for the entire time I've had a channel. So, content warning, trigger warning, we will be discussing blood, needles, knives, piercings, scalpels, everything related to that is going to be in here somewhere. So if that's not your thing, totally fine. Click away. I have many other videos that you can look at instead, but I do think this is something that we should talk about because the whole time I have had an internet presence, people have wanted to know about how do I cut my girlfriend? What is Bloodplay? How do I do it? How can I do piercings? Where can I learn this? And I like to think that I have fairly high standards for myself as a content creator, ethically speaking. I try to not talk about things that are outside of my skill set. And when it comes to topics that are very complex, very nuanced, suspension, breath play, blood play, I do not top for those things. My knowledge in them is much more limited. And I really worry about giving someone the impression that because they watched me talk about something on a YouTube video, they now know everything there is to know about something before they then go and do it with a partner. And sometimes that's not really an issue. When you talk about pet play, for example, even if you don't really know what you're doing, if you stumble through it, most likely no one will end up with some kind of catastrophic life-altering injury. The same is not true for things like blood play. In the wrong hands, that information could be really, really dangerous. However, the longer that I've had to think about this, I realize that for a lot of people, when they are getting into BDSM on their kind of newbie hard limit list, there's mutilation, dismemberment, scats, water sports, blood play, and diapers. Some combination of those 9 times out of 10 is going to be what a newer person has for their hard limits. And while I think at least part of that is safety concerns and just not really being into it, I wonder how much of that is stigma. Because what I find is a lot of people assume because you might be into blood or you want this, you are depressed, you have a history of self-harm, you're a cannibal, you're a serial killer, you're trying to hide your evil tendencies within BDSM. And that's really hard to sit with, and I think that can also prevent people from trying something that they might actually really be into. So what I want to do here is not discuss this from a how to do it perspective, but from a why perspective, a mental, emotional sort of a place. Because when I was getting into BDSM myself for the first time, I wasn't that different. I had pretty much all of those limits. And I thought, why would anyone ever want to do that? Why would anyone be into that? That seems way too far for me. And at the time, that helped keep me safe. But it also helped keep me from something that I did end up later really enjoying. And I wonder how my kink experience would have gone had I tried it sooner and had I let go of that stigma sooner. And I also have to imagine that part of the reason it is so hard to find good quality, accessible information about the safety of blood play is because of that stigma, not just the safety, but because of how other people think about it. Because I think we see the same thing with other more niche, more extreme forms of BDSM. Rope is kind of the exception to that. It's very, very mainstream. But other areas like hypnosis, mindfucking, that can be very hard to get to in a BDSM context. Which, when you think about it, we have an entire piercing industry. Piercing and tattooing is very popular in the US. Why isn't information about how to do blood play then more easily available, knowing that in a vanilla context, some of those very same things are treated so differently? And I think we should start maybe with my own experience with blood play, because again, it wasn't something that I really naturally was drawn to. I didn't really even think that deeply about doing it before I started learning about it. I had a partner at the time when I did get into it, 2-3 years into my journey, where they had a writing on their FetLife account that was to another partner that came before me. And it was this very romantic, almost very emotional, like mentally just drawn together writing that really struck me. And it changed my perspective on what blood play could be, what it could mean. And that was kind of in the back of my head the first time I went to Kink Fest, which is a big BDSM convention they used to have, at least down in Portland. And the first year that I went, there was a class, actually 2 classes, by Alice Little that now has her own YouTube channel. And she taught intro classes for blood play as somebody that was a certified EMT. And I kind of went because it was very novel. It was very much a new thing. It was like, wow, I've never seen anyone do something like this. I've never seen a class like this. I need to go. I wasn't in my kid in a candy store phase anymore, but I was in an area, as I continue to be, where new things are very exciting for me. If I get to learn a new thing, I'm like, oh, yes, this is my catnip. I love this. This is my favorite. And blood play was one of those things. And Kink Fest, I don't know if it has a reputation for this, but every other year I've gone, they have classes on hook pulls, on medical stapling, on breath control, on just everything that's kind of edgy and hard to find. Like, Kink Fest is kind of into that stuff. So I went, and they were very informational, especially because of how seriously Alice took everything. And after my partner and I took the class, we decided this was something we wanted to try for ourselves. Now, he, as the top, was someone that had already done stuff like this before because of the other partner I mentioned that was really into needles. And so we went down to the vendor hall and we got some needles, we got some supplies, because there was someone there that specialized in medical play equipment. So it was very easy to get to. They had a whole area of the convention that was for blood play. We didn't have anything like that I remember at the dungeon we went to at the time. So we really kind of seized the moment and decided to try it. Now, by that point, I had had my nipples pierced, so I wasn't entirely unfamiliar with needles in a non-injection setting, but I didn't fully know what to expect. During the class, she had given a demo and shown us what it was like to, watch a needle go through and see the whole process and removing it, talking about everything in so much detail. But that doesn't necessarily prepare you as a bottom mentally for what it's like to actually have it done. And I want to say that when we did this, we did it on my back, I want to say, because I was worried about visually seeing the needle going in and that kind of messing with me mentally. And I just wanted to have my barriers be relaxed a little bit. So we tried it. And I remember the way that it felt. I can't remember what size of needle we used. I think it was 20 gauge. And I remember it kind of pinching almost against my skin, like almost like you're just, the tiniest little bit of skin is just getting pinched really, really hard. And then it almost kind of disappeared, like it went away under the skin, and then it popped back out again, and it was this very other little quick, tiny little painful sensation. And I was like, oh, that's very interesting, because it's almost like it gets your endorphins up as the needle is going in, and by the time the needle comes out on the other side, your endorphins have kind of like relaxed a little, and it's like, oh, there it is again. And I actually really enjoyed it. And that was very surprising for me because I'm not a masochist, and I was like, I am just doing this as a service, power exchange. Like, that was the vibe I was on. And let's note that for a second. I think a lot of people believe that the reason you like Bloodplay is because you're an extreme masochist and you're just like the edgiest of the edge. The way that I went into doing Bloodplay, it was a service. It was an act of devotion. I was literally giving the thing that makes me alive, like, to my partner. And that was a very, very deep emotional thing. And that's kind of how I went about it mentally, even if I wasn't necessarily going to be into the pain for the sake of the pain. And I can't remember how many needles we did. It was probably like 4 or 5. It wasn't really that many. But that experience gave me a taste. It gave me the confidence to try it again and know that it was something that I liked. And that was just a really wonderful new experience to have. And over the next couple of years, we went to more classes, more conventions. We learned about stapling. We learned about artistic cutting. We learned about using stencils. So many, many other classes that happened where we just gained more information and gained more comfort and perspective in what we were doing. Now, I have only ever done needles or anything like that with this one partner and then on myself as well. And I find for me, when I do needles by myself, it's this very almost meditative practice, I suppose, because of like how like focused it is and how you almost kind of like, at least when I do it, I sort of like synchronize with my breath as I do it. I have this sort of rhythmic breathing as the needle is going in and out, like you learn how to do if you're about to get a piercing. It's very similar to that. And it just is this very recentering thing where I find if I am, and I don't believe that BDSM should be used as a substitute for therapy, but it can be a little bit nice and sort of mentally relaxing, and I think that's perfectly reasonable and fine. But I find it's very mentally recentering if I'm like struggling with something, if I'm having a hard time, having that moment with myself to sort of, it's like mental reintegration with my body almost in this very visceral way. That's the best way I can describe it. So I have sort of this perspective from doing it with a partner, of it being power exchange, of it being devotion, of it being service, in this very, very powerful way. And then with myself being, I guess it could be like devotion to myself, I suppose. That's, if you want to label it that. I hadn't thought of it before until this very moment. But yeah, sort of a self-devotion, a sort of self-reflection, reconnection, and very, very much connected with a partner. Oh my God. Like if you're like, I don't get it, why would anyone do this? You can do Bloodplay from a very detached, medical, cold, clinical perspective. If that's your kink, go for it. But it's not just that. And that's what I didn't know before I did it for myself. I realized it could be like, because I don't like medical play. I should say that I don't like medical play. It's like, there's a lot of kinks that I'm not like, just like, fine with. Medical play is like a no. I don't like cold. I don't like white, sterile. That's like, it puts me in a very bad headspace. I don't like it. And I thought that would be what needles and scalpels and so on would be like. I mean, you do, just in terms of safety, have to have some distance from your partner so you don't stab them by accident with the needles that are in you. But it is this very close, very, very connective thing. And honestly, I'm very surprised that more rope people don't do needles. I have seen a few, but it's that very like close in, comforting, again, sort of like suffering for your partner, devotional kind of a thing. For me, emotionally, it is that way. And you can go into scenes with different perspectives. You can go in with different intentions, whether that be cold, medical, mindfucky, edgy, masochist play, or that being very devotional, soft, emotional, but still intense. That intensity is present. And that is what stuck with me going forward. Now, after we did needles, we then tried scalpels for the first time. I can't help myself, so I will say this. I'm not trying to educate too much, but I will say, two things. Knife play and blood play are not the same. Knife play is about the sensation of using knives, using blades on the skin. It's not about the act of drawing blood. Part of the reason why I felt ready to take that class was because I had done a lot of knife play with my partner. I kind of knew the sensation a little tiny bit. And still, it wasn't the same. Blood play is about drawing the blood and doing stuff with the blood. Knife play is about the edge, the blade, the knife itself. So those are different. I cannot recommend using a random knife for drawing blood. The way that I have always learned is by using a sterile scalpel. That is what I know how to do. And so there is a little bit of a medical component to it. There is a little bit of that just by virtue of how it is packaged. But the class that Shay teaches on decorative cutting is a very, very just different way of thinking about it. Because again, it's not really this medical thing. It's not like that. It's not clinical. It's not like big evil sadist doing the most sadistic thing possible to do to a bottom. It is, I guess it can be, but it's how to make your partner a canvas almost. And it's almost like kind of your partner is this beautiful canvas and you do beautiful art on them. And by doing that, it's a very connective, emotional place to be in. And Naj also kind of talks about that. When Naj talks about them doing self-play a lot, they talk about how they kind of see their whole body as a canvas, and so scarring and things don't bother them because that's part of decorating the canvas. And I find that comes in a lot with a lot of people's experiences doing blood play, and especially when it's decorative and the cutting isn't just for the sake of cutting, it's about making a design, it's about creating art. That is a big part of it. And it can also be very ritually important. It can be very symbolic as well. And almost all of the cuttings I have done have been something that is symbolic in some way, even when it's very simple, even when it's a geometric design, a single line. Those represent points in my other relationships. They represent how long I was doing power exchange for. They represent who I am as a kinkster. And even when relationships end, even when things kind of go in a different place, those things are still important and still there and still kind of signify something. Of course, the scarring is a big part of it, because with needles, you don't really get scarring. At least I never have. I can't speak for everyone. But with scalpels, you can do anything you want. You can prevent whatever you want, but body's going to do what a body's going to do, and sometimes scars just happen to happen. And I think that's kind of one of the maybe negative things about doing blood play is it's like having something from someone that you can never take off. And that can be really powerful in a good way. It is kind of like having a very permanent collar that no one else can remove for you. And that can also be a double-edged sword. That can also be a really negative thing. So you should be careful. I think this isn't a flippant thing. It isn't a, do this whole decorative back cutting because it seems like a fun time. If you're not going into it with emotional, deep intention, then that's a little bit easier. But if it is a very emotional, deep bonding thing for you, if it is a suffering thing for you, if it is a shared activity with your partner that's very, very, very close and connected, then going in that direction is a lot harder to separate from long term than a flogging. for example. But it is still, I think, not what people expect. I don't think it's this like, ooh, big, bad, scary, the most pain ever. And maybe I'm strange here, but scalpel design does alter how it feels, because different scalpels have different shapes to them. They kind of cut the skin in a different way. And the direction you pull things in relation to the grain of the skin does also change like how things feel. But it's not as painful as like I think people expect it to be. Like maybe I'm just like, maybe I am the edge lord and I don't know it, but like I have they do run out your adrenaline because it is like your body is being injured in a pretty profound way, but that can make really fucking high as hell subspace, I'll tell you that. But it's not just dragging a scalpel and making everything super nervy and painful. I don't know how to say this exactly, but it's almost like you get to a point where it goes beyond that, and it's just pressure. It's not just, but like it goes from pain to pain, pressure, pain, pressure, pain, pressure. That's not going to make sense to anybody else, I'm sure, but that's how I think about it. And that's why I am so surprised that more bondage people don't do this, because that pressure, that's almost like your partner is like hugging and like into your skin, but in a very visceral, very literal way that you don't get with bondage. And maybe that is my brain making weird overlaps that are not there for anyone else, but that is how it is for me. So maybe if you have been worried about trying this because, you know, only like bad, sadistic, really, really mean people are into this, and if I do this, this means XYZ thing about me, it doesn't have to mean that. It doesn't have to do that at all. And I will say this as well. It is really good for roleplay. Like if you're into vampires, werewolves, primal play, rough body play, like there's a lot of depth you can add by putting Bloodplay into the mix as well. And if you're into ordeals, trials, suffering for your partner, overcoming something to achieve a goal, this also fits into that kind of category. And if you like decorative stuff, if you like the idea of a needle corset, if you like having your body being turned into a canvas, also totally that as well. And I think all of those experiences are really wonderful and go beyond just one single stereotype. So I don't know if I did anything here today. I don't know if I just rambled. I had to film this like 3 times because my microphone kept switching to negative 20 decibels, so there was no audio. So I had to try and recreate this conversation again, which is kind of hard to do. But yeah, I know my goal again is I want to talk about stuff like this, where the instruction is very complicated and very dangerous, but maybe knowing more about the nature behind it makes someone curious, makes somebody have less stigma around something. You know, that's kind of the goal. And I hope that this helped, knowing a little bit about my own journey. And this is something where I had this like spark, that made me really want to talk about this. One is I had a spark when I was like walking down the hallway in my apartment, just apropos of nothing, and I was like, I think I really want a top for this. Like just out of just nowhere. I was just like, oh yeah, I'd like a top for needles, I think. Just I've been trying really hard to get back into my local kink world, and so I think my brain was processing that somewhere in the background, because I do it on myself, so I should think about maybe having my own kit, and who knows, maybe I'll be a big time famous needle top. Maybe not, I don't know. That was just a random idea. And then when I was trying to sleep the other night, I was laying there and I was like, I need to talk about why people are into Bloodplay, because in some sense that is more important than the how of how to do it. And this is the result of those little sparks. And I would love to hear from you all. If you are people that are also into Bloodplay, if you are curious, if this is totally not your thing, whatever happens to be the case, I would love to hear from you all down below. I would love to know what your experiences are, what your mental state around this is, because, you know, I mentioned stigma a bunch, and we have to remember as well, I don't think, you know, everyone will have knowledge of this, but not that long ago on FetLife, like 2 years ago, they had a big kerfuffle with some of their credit card processors who did not like some of the content that was allowed on their website. One of the things they did not want was Bloodplay. And they were like, hey, if you keep having this on your website the way it is now, we will stop processing your payments for you, and then you will have no money and the website will die. And it is very, very much underestimated how much power credit card processors have over what is allowed on the internet and where. It is kind of spooky to think about. And they somehow ended up resolving that at some point, but there was a while there where, like, every group, every discussion, every photo of anything with blood or talking about blood or scalpels or needles or piercings, anything related to it at all was just gone. Bye. Cannot be here anymore. It is banned. On FetLife. On FetLife. If we cannot talk about it on there, where is anybody gonna find the information, the resources, other people to know how to do this, to talk about it, to understand their own desires? Kind of scary. So maybe YouTube will delete my channel now that I have talked about that. Knock on wood. YouTube, I'm trying to just help people here. Please do not ban me. Thank you. Anyways, now that I have jinxed this whole video, I think that's going to be everything. So yeah, leave a comment down below if you have a story to share. If you enjoyed this, if you have not already, please do subscribe, because I make videos twice a week about all sorts of kink and BDSM related topics. And finally, if you really enjoyed this, if you want to support what I do, the best way that you can do that is with Patreon. I do have some older videos and photos on there where I show you all either self-doing needles and blood play or examples with partners. If you want to access more information like that, it is over on Patreon, because I have just more control over who can see things, and that makes me more comfortable as a content creator. But anyways, if you do already support me over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye bye.